new season.
You're listening to Arkansas Preps Weekly on Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
Here we go.
What is up, everybody? Thanks for joining us on episode 57 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network. I'm Kyle Sutherland, and I want to welcome you officially to the first edition of, well, I guess the second edition of spring sports coverage, as we've already released the baseball episode, but now we're going to get into some softball and going to bring in a familiar face, Mr. Jared Hawthorn, a.k.a. the softball guru, back for what is this now, Jared? Season 4, I guess we have done this. Started in 2022. So those ones that were coming up as freshmen are now seniors. It's crazy to believe that. I know this hits you as a parent a little bit because this is Jaylee's senior year at Cutter. But, man, I am beyond excited. I know this is something that we always look forward to. You and I start talking about it really at the beginning of each year. And we're ready to rock and roll again with another softball season.
Definitely, I'm excited to be here. This is our 4th year, Jaylee's senior year, all those things that you just talked about. I'm ready for warmer weather and softball.
Yeah, absolutely. You got actually, I know we talked a little bit about before, you're going to try to rep some of the in-state colleges. What better one to start with than the Nationals? Going blank there for a second. The National Park Nighthawks. Of course, Jaylee is going to go play her college softball there. We got a lot of kids that are already there, some that are going too. So I know you're going to try to, like we just said a second ago, rep those in-state colleges that we all love to. We, again, have many kids that are already playing at multiple of them.
Well, I just figured I'd have a little fun with it. And since we do this once a week, during the softball season, I just do a different college from somewhere in Arkansas every week. And I definitely had to start with National Park. Coach White might would have murdered me otherwise since Jaylee's coming over there. And she's done a great job and built a great program at National Park. And, we're excited about Jaylee getting a chance to play for such an amazing coach. And, every week I'm going to try to do a different college. So if you're a college coach in Arkansas and you're not sure if I have your gear or not, let me know. Hit me up. Give me a hat. We'll rep somebody different every week.
I need to do that too. I always wear these. I think just about every podcast I've done for the last year, I'm in a t-shirt. These things are just so comfortable, man. I wear them during the summer and all year round pretty much. So I might have to up my game to some college attire as well. But well, let's go ahead. Actually, before we get into it, I want to remind everybody, if this is your first time, I know that we've got some regulars that have been here before with us. Of course, we've got some freshmen coming in, new course players, but also each year we've continued to really thankfully grow this thing. And if you are new to it, the process that we usually go through, and this is for all sports that we talk about on a weekly basis, but we start in the highest classification, we'll work our way down. But before we do get into talking about 6A, make sure you're subscribed on all of our platforms. We've got, of course, this, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe on there. If you haven't already, hit that notification bell so you're alerted when we release an episode. Also, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the audio platforms were there as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. So Class 6A, Jared, every year, and many that have listened or watched before, you'll hear us say, we've talked about this before a million times, or we've said this before a million times, because every single year you're going to have some of the same teams that are back in contention. And really it all starts with Bentonville. The Bentonville Tigers, of course, got upset by Bryant in 2023 in the semifinals, and they didn't bring back a whole lot last year. I think it was Ryan Sanders in the circle and maybe one or two others from that star-studded 23 class that they graduated. Got off to a 1-2 start. So, of course, you and I are getting questions. What in the world is going on with Bentonville? Well, they're playing between sophomores and freshmen, a total of about 7 or 8. So they had some things to figure out. But really, it didn't take them that long to get things figured out. By the time they got into conference play, they were just rolling. And now you look at Bentonville, and yes, they're missing Ryan Sanders. She is now at the University of Louisville. But they've got all of those kids back that played as freshmen and sophomores that have that full year of experience up against a great level of competition. And just looking at the 6A picture, Jared, we'll just start in the West because really to me, this classification starts, of course, with Bentonville. Then you bring in the 6A runner-up in Springdale Harbor. Also Rogers. Rogers probably has more motivation than just about anybody in Class 6A, probably than a lot of teams in the state, regardless of class, because for 3 consecutive years, they've lost not only in the semifinals, but all of those games were decided by a single run. So I'm not Coach. I'm going to call her Coach Tori because I know she recently got married at Rogers, and I don't want to get her last name wrong. But Coach Tori, her first year there last year, she did a great job taking over for that program, and so in year 2, trying to get over that hump and get to the state championship game. But yeah, just another year that we expect the West to be really good again, especially in that top half.
Well, I definitely like the experience that Bentonville gained by playing all those young players last year, and now they have that experience. And there's a lot of talented players there at Bentonville. You know, you got Aniston Reith, and you're gonna have a sophomore pitcher in Darby Bobby that I think is going to be a really good one. And then at Rogers, there's a ton of talent at Rogers. And I was making notes today, so if I glance down at my notes, I was looking at some of these, and you got Ava Johnson, and you got.
Johnson just graduated. Dalen Osborne's the one to watch. Johnson's actually at Boston. Yeah, she graduated.
That's what I meant to say. Is you lost Ava Johnson, but you have Osborne, and you have the Fithian sisters, and you have 2 or 3 different players there that are going to be strong in Rogers. And I was just looking at that. Looking at Rogers and Bentonville, to me, we're going to be really strong over there. I still think Harbor's going to be right there in the conversation. And then, of course, there's going to be a little bit of that, Cabot, Bryant, that's always in there. But I really, after what they did last year with youth and now have experience, I kind of like Bentonville right off the bat, and kind of watch and see what they do the first few weeks and how those players respond to getting back into it.
Yeah, once again, as they always do, another loaded schedule. I know that they are playing 2 nationally ranked teams. Of course, they're Sterlington, Louisiana, which they always go down to Louisiana early in the season, play some of those teams up kind of in the north part of the state. They also got Melissa, Texas, which I believe is a top 3 maybe nationally ranked team. In some of the early polls that have already come out, they're going to play a 2-game series down there. Melissa, of course, is the defending 5A Division II state champion. They've got Coach Crabtree, her daughter, I know, is a Texas, signee now that signing day's already passed. One for Bentonville that you mentioned, Aniston Wright. I think it's pronounced Wright. I'm not 100% sure. I learned that in Farmington last year, but
I never
phenomenal.
Know if it's Wright or Reith.
Aniston R. We'll call her that. But man, huge bat, great first baseman. She obviously pitches too. She comes over from Harbor and is now playing for Bentonville. Of course, Harbor has most of their kids coming back, led by Sierra Dotts. What a freshman year she had. She ended up being our underclassman of the year, just leading that team to the state final as a freshman. Did a great job. And as I said, really, other than Aniston going over to Bentonville, Coach Osnes in his second year at the helm, of course, had that legendary career at Farmington, took over for Harbor last year, and has got a lot coming back. And as we talked about Rogers, you mentioned going to the Central. I think Cabot is going to be – they're probably the favorite for me right now in the Central. Brian, of course, Lisa Dreer did step down last year. Eric Ryan, her assistant, did get promoted, so they kept familiarity there. But I think looking at Cabot, Jared, they really, and look, any team would, they really missed Kayla Bernard, not only in the circle, but they missed her bat too. I think is really, was because they had a great season last year, but a big part of them getting to the state final was what she did. Of course, they did graduate Sarah Camplain, great outfielder, good bat that's also playing at National Park now. But they've got a lot coming back. You just look at, I think, just about all of their infield is returning, if I'm not mistaken. They've got some pitching coming back. So I think probably you look at the Central, and it's going to be Cabot and Bryant more than likely competing for that conference title again.
You got a load of talent at Cabot. You got, I believe it's Addison Cooper, a really quality pitcher there. You've got Addison Fulbright that is a great catcher. And there's just off the top of my head, and I'm not even looking at my notes, and I've got notes on them, but I think Alyssa Duncan, you just start looking down the lineup, and it's like good player, And so just really impressed with them top to bottom. Of course, when you're looking at 6A school, it's a little easier to have a load of talent in there versus some of the small schools. But individually, knowing a lot of those players, seeing them in the summer in the travel ball circuit and stuff, they're pretty stacked. So, and several of those girls are juniors and seniors this year, so they have the experience. I really like Cabot in the Central.
I think some other, well, at least one other wild card that I always throw in, Bentonville West. Coach Cantrell, he had a real young team last year. I had a chance to see a lot of those kids. Of course, when I went to the Farmington tournament last year that they played in, some of his girls were, I think, were on a mission trip, if I'm not mistaken, so they weren't there. It was around that's right before that spring break time in mid March. So gotta look at them. They played against Farmington, they played against Hackett, so they played up against not 6A schools, but obviously great competition. Those were the 3 and 4A state champion right there that ended up being the 3 and 4A state champion. So Bentonville West, I also look in that mix as well. What kind of improvement will we see from maybe like a Rogers Heritage in that conference as well? The Central, though, it's just North Little Rock has been, in the past, a perennial power. I know that they lost, some kids last year to transfers, graduation, all that stuff. They're trying to rebuild that back up. But probably if we're just talking about sleeper, wild card, whatever you want to call, I think Bentonville West might be at the top of that list for me.
Yeah, I think Bentonville West, the 4 years that I've done this with you, and I've learned more and more about 6A because that wasn't really my wheelhouse. 1 through 3A is kind of where I'm the most familiar, and then I've been learning 4 through 6A for the last 4 years and trying to get a handle on them because most of those are Northwest Arkansas schools. But Bentonville West, in the 4 years that I've been doing this, every year that we've always thought they were kind of that fringe team, just not quite there, but they've always found a way to get in the conversation towards the end of the year and make some noise. And they've always got talent. They're always got 2 to 3 really outstanding players. And this year, I think when I look back at some of their roster and recognize some of those names, I think they have some talent that they may be a team that kind of surprises people again. Everybody kind of thinks of them as the second, third, fourth choice down the list, and they may sneak back up in that second, third conversation. So,
yeah, and then I was looking down at 5A, and you obviously start with the defending state champion Sheridan. Of course, Scott Hoffman feels really good about the team that he brings back. So he lost from catcher up the middle was what he lost. He lost his catcher, of course, Callie Kilburn in the circle. That's now at Washita. That's now getting some innings for Washita Baptist, doing a good job, and also lost his center fielder. Obviously, and man, the big one that just kills us, Mary Lim too, the third baseman that's going to Mississippi College, huge bat, been just a great contributor for Sheridan since her freshman year. Tore her ACL in basketball before her sophomore year, obviously was out that year, and just sadly she tore her other, I believe it was her other ACL, but I know she had ACL surgery recently and is going to be out for her senior year. So just really devastating there. And then as far as on the field, yes, I mean, goes without saying what you're missing at third base there, but I think really missing her bat, Jared. I mean, she batted, 550 last year, only struck out once. Just insane stuff right there. And where she was at, I believe she was third in the lineup. You got Skylar Sterrett there that's pretty much a double waiting to happen, it seems like, every time she's at bat. So you think about her, yeah, I mean, possibly a triple. It's like she's one of those that I've referred to many times, her, Cam Cole-Klager from Benton, some of those girls that just have lightning fast speed. You're like, oh, that's just a ground out. You look down to score it, and then you look up and they're on first base. That's just the kind of player that Skylar is, in the leadoff spot. And then you bring someone like a Mary Lim up to the plate, and then you're almost going to get a guaranteed run on the board. So that's definitely going to, her bat certainly, yes, in the field as well, but her bat definitely will be missed there. But, her sophomore year, she didn't play at all, like I said, with being out, and she still earned, I think it was the Teammate of the Year award is what Coach Hoffman told me. So she's going to be there kind of like a coach on the field, just like she was then. And I know that she's going to still have a major impact, but he's really excited about his freshman class. He was talking a lot about that to me. Of course, you've obviously got Cooper Terry, which a bit of, we just talked about the sad part of Mary Lim. Luckily, Cooper has been cleared from everything, and seems to be very healthy from the stuff that some of the injuries and things she had dealt with in the past. But man, when she did throw last year, of course, we saw her at right field some, but when she was throwing, golly, she was lights out. It looked like the old Cooper Terry, frankly.
Well, Cooper Terry is just a freak athlete too. Skylar Sterrett's a freak athlete. It's Sheridan is even. It's a huge blow losing Mary Lim. There's no doubt about it. It's a huge blow. But if there's a team in the state that can absorb that, it's Sheridan. I mean, they got talent from top to bottom. They've still got great arms. You got Coop, and you got Chloe Clark, and you got at least two other pitchers in the mix. And Cooper, when she's healthy, is as good a pitcher as there is anywhere in the state of Arkansas.
Yeah.
And from all indicators, what I've seen and heard, Coop's as healthy as she's been in a long time. So that will bode well for Sheridan. They've got Mason Wilson that is just an absolute stud, with the bat and with the glove both. She'll probably step up and take up a lot of that slack that Mary Lim left. Just quality from top to bottom. Sheridan's district is just loaded with softball talent. It seems to Sheridan area has just been a mecca for softball talent for about 8 or 10 years now, and it just continues to just turn them out. You were talking about Skylar Sterrett's speed. If you're just talking about straight sprints, she's the fastest player in the state of Arkansas. There may be some that can get her in a hurdle or something here or there or something that's specialized, but as far as just raw speed, she's the fastest player in the state. Of course, she's going to go play for the Razorbacks, so that says a lot right there. But I like Sheridan for sure right now in 5A, even without Mary Lim, and that's saying a lot because she's one of the best players in the state. Definitely, in my opinion, one of the top 3 hitters in the state of Arkansas. And losing her is such a big blow, but Sheridan's just so loaded. I like them again in 5A right now.
And you certainly right now you got to think of them probably as yes, you pointed it out right there. If not the favorite in 5A, certainly regardless of where you have them up there with the top 2 or 3. But I'm really wondering what their conference outlook is going to look as you take Benton. We'll talk about the Central here in a second, but Benton is now in the 5A Central. You got Lake Hamilton, which Reese Lackey, they're the star player from Lake Hamilton that helped them really make some noise last year. She's still playing softball, just not at the high school. Unless she's just, I guess, strictly stricken with travel ball, right? I got that correct.
That's secondhand knowledge. That's what I'm hearing is that she's sticking with just travel softball and not high school softball to help protect, lessen reps and get ready for college kind of deal. And take care of her body and get ready to go play major college softball probably. Doing what she needs to do for her on a personal level, not gonna knock anybody for taking care of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely, that's a huge blow to Lake Hamilton as a team, for sure.
Yeah, and then Lakeside always tends to find that 3 or 4 seed. They always tend to get in there. I'm going off memory here. Who's Whitehall's another one that we're curious. They've got Bethany Ropers going to Louisiana Tech. Man, big bat. She's been in the circle for them for, I guess, all 4 years now. Taylor Irvin is another one that's gotten a lot of innings for them that's played, in the infield a lot. So I look for Whitehall, Lakeside probably to take, behind Sheridan, maybe to get that fight for that 2-3 spot. So I'm really interested to see how the South shakes out. The Central is the one, and Kevin and I talked about this in the baseball episode. 1 through 4A in a district tournament or regional tournament, you always have somebody, and we'll talk about this in particular in 3A, but you always have one of those teams that gets left out because you lose in the first round. Obviously, if you don't make it past the first round, you don't move on to the next round of postseason play, whether it be regional or state. And that's going to kind of be how it is a little bit. Obviously, you don't have regional tournaments in 5A, but you've only got 4 playoff spots. And in the Central, you've obviously got defending runner-up BB. You add Benton, plus you've got a Greenbrier team in there, which I don't know a ton about. I know a little bit about Greenbrier, but I've not really ever gotten a whole lot of responses back, so I don't know a bunch. But Sylvan Hills, they had some big bats last year, needed some help in the circle. They did get some help in the circle. And then you also throw in a Valonia team in there that, they've dealt with a lot of injuries, particularly over the past few years. Lila Toll, the Baylor signee, is a senior now in that 2025 class. I would say Valonia, as much as anybody, has lot, as far as 4-year starters and kids that have played since their freshman, sophomore year, as much as anybody has those returners. You think about Emma Sowell at first base. You think about Lila there in the middle infield. Linnea McLaughlin, 2026, that's back there at catcher. Raylan Kelly has also gotten a lot of innings at catcher. But Coach Sullivan, Adita Porterfield in the outfield, that's played just about every single position out there. But Coach Sullivan really feels like that he's got some more help in the circle this year. So they feel like that they're a little bit deeper there, have a little more options. But I don't know, Jared. This is going to be, somebody's going to get, a really good team is going to get left out of the Central. And I didn't even talk about Maumelle. That might be the best out of all those, because especially in 5, when you play these doubleheaders, we know how important it is to have multiple arms. They've got Layla Ward. They've got Gracie Keeling. Of course, Kat Keeling, her sister, the great catcher, she's moved on to Newport, I believe is where she's at now. So she is playing college ball. But, Maumelle graduated Peyton Hester, the all-state center fielder, but they did bring in Audrey Bishop, who was a 3-year starter at Maumelle Charter. Big bat. Coach White's saying that she told me that she will be playing college softball somewhere. So the pieces that they lost, they seem to have filled. But I think Layla Ward and Grace Keeling, especially in that 5A where you're going to play those doubleheaders, that is going to be massive.
Well, quick note before I address all the Central part, going back to the South, another one that we didn't discuss, and I think they're maybe off a little bit, is Arkansas High.
Yes.
Because they still have Macy Lee, they have Jewel Smart in the circle. Those two can both throw it really well. You got Anaya Arnold, that's one of the best athletes in the state of Arkansas. She's up there real close around that Skylar Sterrett range as far as just a freak athlete with speed and a big bat and a big arm. And they've got 2 or 3 other great players, Taylor Pascarella and several more to go with them. And they were really good last year and really pushed for the top of that conference last year. So I don't want to leave them out. And definitely Wild has some great players, so they're going to be in that conversation. Then when you jump back over to the Central, man, golly, all of the stuff that you just talked about times 10, because there's 4 or 5 or 6 really good schools, and then there's 2 more that could be in that mix, and we don't know for sure because we don't really have a ton of information on them. That's one thing I'll say real quick. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but when we do this and we reach out to coaches and we ask for information, it helps us when they send us stuff back and we get to know their players and stuff. And there's a handful of the coaches, and especially it seems like in 4A and 5A, that just don't ever send us anything. And so it makes it hard for us to talk about their players when we can't get information from them. But there's definitely just a pile of really good schools in the Central there. Benton's loaded.
Yeah.
BB's loaded. Sylvan Hills is loaded. And one player I'll mention that I expect to have a big year this year at Sylvan Hills is Zamari Ball. That young lady is an amazing pitcher, an amazing athlete and a hitter, and just a great kid. And everything I saw out of her from Post and other coaches and different people talking about her this summer after she was playing in the travel circuit is that kid's poised to have a big breakout year. And you've got a lot of other talented players there. You got Ryan Poza as a great catcher, and you got a couple other pitchers to go with Zamari, Leighton Simmons and different ones to give them some depth. And this may be the year that Sylvan Hills, flexes their muscles a little bit and can truly compete for the top of their conference. I don't know. The Central is going to be one of those that it's going to be it's like the SEC West every single week. They're going to beat each other up, and whoever can survive and has the least injuries may be the team that comes out at the end of the year. Yeah,
you mentioned Benton there, and I think that after they because they lost in the first, I think it was the first round last year, and that was after coming off of a three-peat. And Benton had that run that Benton had was one of the best in state history. I can just about guarantee that I'm not going to say that maybe like in like the lower divisions that we'll never see an undefeated team, not just once but twice, 2 years in a row. But the schedule that they played it in, and for those that are new, you'll hear us both talk about strength of schedule quite a bit. That's something that we always preach on. But what Benton did in 2021 and 2022 in particular, going undefeated against that slate, playing the Bentonvilles, and of course playing just in 5A in general and doing what they did. I think that it's easy to sometimes leave them out since they weren't necessarily a contender at times. They were at times last year, but a lot of youth. Of course, Rexy Crane got a lot of innings for him in the circle as a freshman. She's a year older. I know that she had also dealt with some injury issues. They also added Peyton. Stewart. Yeah, Stewart. I was about to say her name wrong. Peyton Stewart from Bryant. Now I know that she also is coming off of an injury. Really good third baseman, great stick as well. So great. She's kind of trying to ease. Yeah, really trying to ease her way back in. So. Definitely can't forget about the Benton Panthers either. Great Coach Cox and Coach Murph. They do a phenomenal job over there. Then you also you look at the East, GCT. They're always in the mix. GCT only lost 2 seniors, technically 1 because Ava Carter who is now playing right field and doing a dang good job at it for the Razorbacks. She was out all year with an ACL injury. So Zoe Reynolds, Coach Reynolds' daughter, she graduated, and they get just about everybody back, including stud pitcher Isabel Matthews, that honestly, if it wasn't for Harbor getting to the state final and Sierra Dots winning underclassman of the year, that was probably Isabel Matthews' to lose.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back one spot.
Yeah, dude, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
One player that I wanted to mention for sure from Benton that's going to be a newcomer on the scene, freshman pitcher Bella Villanueva. Villanueva. Anyway, sorry, Bella. She's a great kid, outstanding pitcher with power and movement, and she's going to give Rexy Crane that 1-2 punch that Rexy's not going to have to do it all. They've got a couple other arms too that are going to mix, but that's another really good little arm that I think is going to make Benton way better than people realize they were going to be this year. They've got some loaded talent, across their defense and their bats, but having that really strong second arm behind or with Rexy Crane, those two are going to stack up, and Benton, I think, is going to make a step back up into the conversation. And then going back to GCT, Isabel Matthews absolutely, I think, is going to be a name that we talk about all season this season. She's going to do some special stuff. So I don't know. GCT has been in this conversation for all 4 years that I've done this on the podcast. Every time we think they might be down, they're right back in the conversation. So I expect it. It's just one of those programs that they have high expectations, kind of like the Bentons and the Sheridans, and they just have high expectations at Greene County Tech. And I really think that they're going to be right back in that top 1 or 2 spots for us to be talking about all year long.
Yeah, I'm looking at them certainly as the favorite in the East. You also always got to look at Valley View as well. Now, Valley View, I talked to Coach Sanders about 3 weeks ago, and it kind of like what we expected. They're going to have to deal with life without Riley Smith. Riley Smith through just what seemed like thousands and thousands of innings for them. You go back to that 2022 4A state championship when, in a way, I always I say it kind of jokingly, Coach BJ Zipfel, that was the coach at that time, that was like the best kept secret in the state that year. We were always talking about Macy McJunkins at Nashville. Riley just comes in and throws that gem of a game and helps Valley View win the 4A state championship before they moved to 5A. And they had a good season last year, and they've got some pieces coming back, but it's really just kind of a pitcher by committee right now, just trying to figure out who's going to, not necessarily, I don't think, be the ace right now, but just kind of who's going to really step up and earn those innings. Then you look over at the West, and that's probably about the most unpredictable for me, maybe outside of Greenwood. Greenwood, they lost 2 pitchers, but still got one that they really like. Of course, Haley McAdams is gone, and then Tori Howard. They both graduated, but Coach, I'll tell you what, Donald's done a really good job. He did a great job at Paris, and I got a chance to see Greenwood play. Do you have their pitcher that's coming back? She's a junior, I think. Do you have her name in front of you? I know it's going to kill me because I watched her pitch against Benton last year.
I don't know that I have the pitcher's name. I've got a ton of Greenwood.
I'm gonna have to find, as I'm killing time here. I'm kicking myself because I definitely don't want to miss it. But I got a chance to see her play or see her pitch against Benton last year in that little round robin that they do, usually in mid-April. And I'm looking it up right now. Stick with me.
Well, while you're looking at players that I know are great players at Greenwood, you've got Sailor Hart and Riley Floyd and Daisy Parker and B. Rafkar, Emmy Burton. I'll tell you, the other thing that they have is an amazing young catcher third baseman, in Emily Creason. They've got a new young pitcher, Alyssa Level, that's going to be really good, I think. You got Lakin Dawson and B. Henderson, some new freshmen and sophomores that are going to be playing. There's a ton of talent at Greenwood. I mean, when I go to travel tournaments, like there's 12 or 14 kids right here I'm looking at on their roster that are like, I see them all the time in the summertime, and just a lot of talent there.
Alyssa Lovell was the one that I was thinking of. Now, there's something else that I should have mentioned at the opening. We're still trying. This is a new year. We're still getting familiar with kids because I was used to Tori and I was used to Haley last year. But yes, so I apologize about that. Alyssa Lovell was the one that I was thinking of.
Yeah, I was thinking Alyssa was a freshman. That's why I wasn't going to say.
Yeah. No, she's a junior now, and that's on me. Hopefully that's the only one that I forget there. But no, she threw a great game. I was really impressed, and that's what that's what Coach Hart was talking about when I talked to him after that game was, look, we know that we're about to graduate 2 arms that have thrown a lot of innings for us. So we want to make sure that we get the kids that are going to be playing for us in the future some good looks. And, you're not going to get a whole lot better looks than Benton, especially that weekend. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's there. It's going to be probably Greenwood. You start with them in the West. Van Buren took a step back. I think we saw how important Emberlyn, and it's no shock because she was their primary arm, but we saw how important Emberlyn Caldwell was to that team, especially with what she was the freshman of the year and the conference for Williams Baptist last year. Had a great interview with her over the summer. And then they also, they had Ashlyn Michael back behind the dish last year. She's actually now at Williams Baptist with Ember and all them. So I think Van Buren, with all the youth that they had, I think they'll take a step forward. Mountain Home, I think that they could be a wild card as well, just like in baseball. But the West, Farmington also, the defending 4A state champion, they graduated just about everybody. They do bring back Morgan Hewer. They bring back Morgan Reeves that it was the freshman last year that ended up being their ace. She started in the state final game there when they beat P Ridge. So Farmington certainly always wanted to watch. Jason Shiree, great coach. And that might be, last year, Jared, what we were talking about with Farmington, they brought back all those seniors. But you think about, they had Reese Shiree, they had Morgan Ewer. Some of those girls were in basketball that ended up going to the state final. And they're probably going to do it again in 5A this year. And then I watched them in that Farmington tournament a week after they won the state championship, and they didn't skip a beat. So I think I don't know that it will be quite that quick this year, but Farmington, if any team's led by Jason Shiree, I trust that they're going to do something good.
Well, they definitely lost a lot. But looking at the roster, they've got a lot of strong freshmen and sophomores that are going to contribute this year. So I do think that they're still going to be very competitive and be towards the top of their conference. The basketball will definitely affect how quick it happens, because they're probably going to be playing deep into the state in basketball, and 2 or 3 of those girls are going to be a part of that, maybe more. At least 2 or 3 of the starters are going to be part of the basketball team. So it may take them a week or 2 to kind of get up and rolling once basketball finishes, but once they do, they'll roll along and they'll be fine. Mountain Home, I actually, to me, they overachieved a little bit last year, but now I think they're going to be right there in that mix. They had a few young ones too that are going to be seasoned players this year, and so they'll be right there in that mix. Right now, I'm still liking Greenwood, for my favorite over there, but there's 2 or 3 that are going to be in the conversation.
And down in Class 4A, the conference that we talked all from the preview pod until the end. We talked about how the 4A1 conference was going to be the most loaded in 4A, just from what they had done the season previous and all the kids that came back. Now, we knew that Gravette, P Ridge, and then Farmington at the time were going to be in that mix. we did not see Gentry doing what it did. Gentry, I would say, had, of all classifications, had the best turnaround of any team, going from 7 wins in 2023 to the state semifinals last year. And that's been their hashtag going into this season, is unfinished business. They got a gorgeous new turf field. You know, I'm not a big turf fan, but that's kind of where we're going. But I will say this, that is a gorgeous complex that they have now. And I'm looking forward to, I know they're ready to play on it and break it in. But it all starts with P Ridge. I know that, you know, for the last few years, I guess, what is it, 3 of the past 4 seasons, they've ended up runner up. You know, really credit to them last year. Farmington was up 6-0, and they made that push in the final inning, and I guess it was the bottom of the 7th, and they scored 5 runs and just weren't able to finish it off. But you know that they're extremely hungry. They got a good bit coming back as well, and arguably the best pitcher in the entire state. But I think it probably does start with both of those teams at the top, with P Ridge and Gentry. Gravett is going to look, I'm not saying that they're, you know, not going to be good or anything, but they're going to look a lot different. You know, they lost Keely Elsey. Their star center fielder. They lost Bryn Romine. They graduated Brooke Handel. They still do have Sydney Kildow that they expect to be their ace. Still got a few big bats in the lineup, but definitely going to look a little bit different from the Gravett teams that we have seen. But you also, too, talking about big bats, Bauxite always has them. They've got MJ Birmingham. You've got Emma King, that are both 4-year starters, huge bats. And then MJ, you know, she's one of the most experienced pitchers in the state. I expect her to have a really big season. They're in the middle infield. You had some youngsters that grew up that we talked about on this preview show last year, that that was probably the area that was going to have to grow up the quickest. And I felt like they did. So I'll just kind of start with those 3 right there. You know, talking about the 4A1, I really like, again, what P Ridge and Gentry has, but also, too, we all, you know, kind of in our area, more so in our area, the Bauxite teams, those are the ones that you always keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, well, definitely. I'm going to start with P Ridge, and that P Ridge and Gentry are going to be my top 2 that I think are going to be right back where they were, battling for top spot up there and battling for top spot in state, probably. Emery Bolin is, in my opinion, if not the best pitcher in the state, she's definitely, it's a conversation between her and about 2 to 3 others. And how you want to sort that out, I don't know, because there's 3 or 4 really amazing pitchers that you'd have to have that conversation about. You know, speed versus spin and different things like that. But Emery has a really good combination of power and spin, and she's proved it with crazy numbers on strikeouts over the last 3 years. And she's going to probably have another year of just, you know, probably 200 to 300 strikeouts again. And she has a real chance to possibly end her career as the all-time leading strikeout pitcher for Arkansas. So she's definitely a huge part of that conversation at P Ridge, and they've got some other great players with her. You know, they've got a new young player that I think will be something that we talk about as we go through the year. And Mackenzie Wayland, she's a really good ball player. And there's a whole pile of kids there that, as we get into the weekly podcast, we'll start mentioning at P Ridge. Gentry's piled up with talent. I thought they overachieved a little bit last year, but it wasn't because they had the talent. I just thought it was young talent last year, and I thought they overachieved by maybe a round or 2. But this year, I think that they deserve to be right there in that conversation. They proved it last year, and then going back to the Bauxite that you mentioned, you know, for 4 years we've talked about Bauxite and some of the players you mentioned with MJ and Emma King and some of them, and once again you're going to have Bauxite right back in that conversation, and then you'll, you know, as you drop to other conferences, you're going to talk about Monticello, and you're going to talk about some of those other really good schools scattered around in 4A, and you're always going to have little dark horse teams that show up like Mena. You know, that they've never quite been able to get to that state championship or semifinal run, but they've always knocked off or beaten 2 or 3 of the really good 4A schools and made noise and you know, been able to get everybody's attention. So there's loads of talent in 4A. And we haven't even talked about Malvern yet. You know, Malvern's going to have a lot. Nashville's, I think, going to be back solid again. So 4A's as always going to have about 10 teams that are just going to be really hard to sort out.
You brought up Malvern, and they had, Kendall Watson. My gosh, man, the season that she had last year and the player that she is, she's, and I think that she can. I think that she'll be able to handle it just fine. But there's going to be some pressure on her. Is it Emily Ming? Which one of the Mingy sisters? I think it's Emily that's still there. She is back, and she's gotten a lot of playing time for him, so she's going to be a big piece. But you think about you lost AJ Fike there at shortstop, a big bat that's now starting for Arkansas Tech. You also lost Bella there behind the dish. That's now, I think she's played just about every single game. Bella Roseberry, that's played multiple games for Washita behind the plate already. So that's two big ones that you lose. But I still think with Noodle there, with Kendall Watson, her nickname's Noodle for those that don't know. She's at one point last year she was batting 800. Like, I talk about strength of schedule all the time, but I don't care who you're playing. 800 that's stupid. It was for like a few weeks that she was around like the 800 range.
875 for like all the way into like the fourth week of the season or something.
That's just insane. So
yeah, but I'll speak to Kendall Watson for just a minute. And we had this conversation probably 5 times last year during podcast. Individually, as an individual hitter, I believe she's the best hitter in the state of Arkansas. She has insane power. We watched her hit home run after home run on us this year, and we basically threw balls on the ground. We threw balls over her head. We threw balls 2 feet into the other box, and she still hit them over the fence. I mean, we were not giving her anything in the strike zone, and she was still hitting home run after home run on us. So, yeah, the kid is an amazing talent. She's a great hitter. Yes, there are ways to get to her here and there, and we found them once in a while, but you're not going to get to her consistently. She had coaches everywhere we went all summer long. That she was at tournaments that we were at. There was coaches stacked up to watch her hit. She'd come up to bat, and coaches from other fields would come over and stand and watch her hit and then go back. And most of the time they were rewarded with some kind of laser beam line drive or a home run. But she's a great kid. She's a very humble kid. She's very quiet. She doesn't like attention. She doesn't want to do anything but just go play softball. But she's a great hitter. Huge power, bats for average. I don't know that she's athletic. She's fast. People don't realize, she's like 6 foot tall and nobody would expect her to run fast, but she's fast. She just kind of has the whole package. I saw her drop a bunt. I don't know that I would ever ask Kendall Watson to bunt for me because she could hit it over just as easy. But I saw her drop a bunt once this summer, and I was like, hey, she's a team player. She doesn't mind the sack bunt. She doesn't mind to do whatever. Really great kid, great athlete, and deserves every bit of anything she ever gets in the softball world.
Yeah, no question. And, Malvern, like you said, Malvern's always in the mix. Nashville, too. That's kind of what I was saying about Jason Shirey a second ago. Any team that Boomer Brown, I played against Boomer Brown in football when he was DC. I know what kind of coach he is. I've seen what he's done in softball. I know that Nashville maybe hasn't been the Nashville that we saw in 2022. Of course, when you lose 7 or 8 seniors, they've had some growing pains since then. And, they've also played a really tough schedule. But I know I've talked to him a few times and feels pretty good about what he has in the circle. Obviously, he's got Landon Tompkins, another one of the not just best hitters in 4A, but one of the best in the state. At least she's actually committed to OBU as well, if I'm not mistaken. Some other sleepers I like. You talked about Mina a second ago. Abby Copine. Anytime she's in the circle, you've got a chance. I think Pottsville is going to make some noise. We talked about them a little bit last year. They were really young, but they've added some pieces and have just about everybody coming back. Jared, I really like Heber Springs. They were at a point last year when they won like 14 straight or something. We were talking about them. And, Taylor Parker, who really throughout her career has kind of been a natural outfielder, but has had to pitch through necessity. When you brought in the Youngblood twins, I believe it's Jordan that mostly pitches. Of course, twins, you know how I am with that. I always get confused, fraternal or identical. I believe it's Jordan that pitches for him, and that really took a lot off of Taylor to be able to have another arm there. So I thought the Lady Panthers really made some noise last year. I know Lone Oak is one that we've kind of been talking about. I'll let you discuss them a little bit. I don't know maybe quite as much as you do, but I know that's one that we both, when we were kind of talking about before the show, that was one that we both pointed out.
I see how you are. You just steal all my talking points. Then all I got to do is just add to it a little, huh? Two of the ones that I was fixing to bring up were Heber Springs and Pottsville. So definitely Pottsville has got a lot of talent, and they had a couple move-ins that helped them. I really think Pottsville is going to be one of the better 4A teams in the state. Talking about Pottsville specifically, you've got Madison Keller and Savannah Mackey there. You got Addie Wilmuth, that's a really good outfielder that I think she helps a little bit with the pitching too. And then you got just a new move-in with Callie Holcomb that's gone to Pottsville. I mean, they were competing up there last year at the end of the year, really doing well, making some noise. And now you've added a couple of good young ones and a new transfer in. So Pottsville has a chance to be pretty special this year too. Heber, the Youngblood sisters, Jordan and Taylor, one pitches, one catches. Jordan, I think, is the pitcher, and Taylor's the catcher. And then, you look at they've got two new players in Emma Moorhead and Carly Holland that are going to be helping them out there. I was looking at some of their stat sheets and stuff and looking at their preview, and they were really solid last year. And then I think they've just really added for this year. So I think they're going to compete really well. And then looking over at Lone Oak, there's new coach over at Lone Oak. I want to say his name is Trent Davis, one of the guys that helps coach with Thunder 07 and travel ball in the summer. And you've got Kendra Terry, a really good pitcher over there. You've got Kirsten Holt, that's a really good hitter over there. There's 4 or 5 new young players that have showed up on scene. They were just kind of starting to make a little noise last year and win quite a few games. And now you've got those kids with a year's experience plus a couple other good players that have gone there with them. I think Lone Oak is going to be kind of that new up-and-coming team that hasn't really made much noise yet in 4A that will this year. So definitely one that we'll have to keep an eye on and see how they do. I can't hear you, Kyle.
Forgot to unmute my mic. I'm notorious. I'm good for one. I'm good for one per episode at least. But I actually hadn't been doing it as much lately. But Star City was one that snuck up on some people last year. Really, me for sure. They were 13-8 at the beginning of May. They lost 3. So basically, around the postseason time, they were sitting just maybe a game or two above 500. Then they got to the state tournament. They blanked Gravette. They blanked Bauxite. So in 2 low-scoring games. So Star City down there in the Southridge. I know that when they were now the 4A8 is not the same because Stuttgart has moved out of that conference, I guess, now into the 4A5. A couple years ago, it was Monticello, it was Stuttgart in that mix. But I kept hearing about how Star City could have one of those teams that could sneak up, maybe not necessarily in 2022 or 23, but they were one of those that I was hearing from coaches in the conference, like, hey, you better watch out for them. I know they had a really good catcher at that time that was a 4-year starter. They've just continued to develop their players, done a really good job. But also, too, speaking of Monticello, that's a team that we're definitely wanting to hit on because, Jared, they've won 45 games over the past 2 seasons. I mean, this 2025 class has been ultra successful. Elena Lyle has led that. I mean, we talked about, I know she was banged up a good bit her freshman year, but anytime you have her in the circle, you have a chance. I don't really care who you're playing. You've got a chance, no doubt. Addie Frazier was one that also stepped up in the circle for them last year. So they've got 2 arms. I think now they've also got some key injuries. Libby Kingston, the UCA commit, she's going to be out for the season. I know they've got 1 or 2 that have got 1 or 2 key players that have some injuries that they're going to be missing. But for the Lady Billies, I think it's just really, last season they were like 23-0, I think, before the state tournament. The year before they were about 22-1. So it's really just once the postseason gets here that they have experienced some struggles, particularly in the state tournament. And so I think that's probably where they're at. Obviously, you take it one game at a time, but that's kind of where they're at is they're like, look, we've already established ourselves from a win-loss standpoint, as talking about the 25 class in particular, as an ultra successful class. We just got to make sure that we keep it turned up once the postseason comes. And I think they can do that.
For sure. 2 of those that you just mentioned that I'll talk about just briefly. Star City, they've got a new young pitcher in Brooklyn McVeigh that I believe will be a huge asset to them. She's a really talented little player. She's a great infielder, a great hitter, lots of speed, and she's got some really good spin when she's throwing the ball in the circle. I think she may be the kind of kid that's a difference maker for them. They've kind of been that team that's made a little noise and been on the bubble. And kids like that with Brooklyn McVeigh are the kids who sometimes push a team right on over to becoming a contender. So she's definitely going to be one that we'll talk about, as we haven't been mentioning a lot over the last 2 or 3 years, but I think we'll be seeing and hear from her a lot this year. Monticello, big storyline right now is they've got some injuries, but man, they're so loaded with talent. I don't know that it sets them back too far. And if there's a good chance that they get 1 or 2 of those girls back by, the end of the season, into the playoffs. And if they do, then they're going to be really dangerous again. Elena Lyle is one of the best pitchers and hitters in the state of Arkansas, hands down. She's a top 10 kid in both categories. And she can do it, from the circle or at the plate. And she's actually a really good defensive first baseman that I've seen in the past too. So, that's a kid that's going to play every day in college. If she's not in the circle, she's going to be on a bag probably at first base, and her bat's going to be in the lineup. Definitely a lot of talent there. And I'll tell you another 4A school that we haven't even talked about yet that's got talent all over the place. And we'll talk about them more as we go through the season, and that's Brooklyn.
You took that one from me. I took a few from you. You took that one from me.
So there's, you start talking about, Brooklyn, and you've got, man, there's talent all over.
Yeah, they lost Madison Woolgers and Ashlyn McNeese. That's going to definitely be 2 big ones that have played a lot for it. But man, I know that Coach Dillon really likes this freshman class, and they've got just about everybody but those 2 back.
Yeah, they lost those 2, pretty much the 2 that hurt them a little bit. But man, they've got 5 or 6 good freshmen coming in. A couple of their others that were just outside the starting lineup that I think have stepped up their game. I'm not going to get into all the different names at Brooklyn, but I definitely, as we get into the weekly podcast, we'll start mentioning some of those individuals at Brooklyn. But they're definitely going to be in the mix in 4A too.
Yeah, Coach Dillon's a great coach, man. I mean, I think some forget when he was at Tuckerman, they won those back-to-back with Michaela Guess and all that crew. I mean, they won back-to-back state championships over Mansfield and then EPC. So 21 and 22, that was when they won those. Before I guess, gosh, that was in 2A, and then Tuckerman moved to 3. So I mean, they got great coaching, and this crop of talent that's coming in, I think could be really good for them. And they've been a good team for a long time, but I don't think that's going to go anywhere anytime soon. Then down, oh gosh, do we need to take a breath before we talk about 3? It's going to happen, man. 3A, always so incredibly deep and no different now. Kevin and I talked about it on the baseball pod. It's just every single year. It doesn't matter the sport, Jared. I mean, it's just so loaded every single season. Then, I think you start really with Lincoln, because they've got, in my opinion, they've got the best player in 3A in Brinkley Morton. We've said that really since her freshman year. Softball's a team sport. We obviously know that, but I think it's pretty safe to say that if they don't have Brink last year, they don't go to the final. I think that's probably safe to say. Again, I'm not saying that they didn't have good players around her, but she just makes that big of a difference. You and I were there at the semifinal game again in Hot Springs against DeWitt. I was there during the state championship. And of course, I know Hackett, they kind of had their way, but Lincoln's always in the mix, especially with her there. I really like the DeWitt Dragons this year. Jared, this was one that I don't think we had them ranked until closer to the end of the season, but this was one that we watched. We knew about 2023 and then up through last year, some of those freshmen and sophomores that were coming through were going to be really solid for them. That turned out to be true. Harley Grammer, she was definitely in the running for our underclassman of the year. Last season, you got AC Cox back there. I believe she's either in the leadoff or the 2-hole, and then going to play shortstop, has been a 4-year starter at that spot. DeWitt brings back everybody. They've got a new coach, but they bring back every single player. And we saw what they did. They played really well against Lincoln in that semifinal game. So I'll just start with those 2 right there. Lincoln, the run. And obviously we're not bringing up Hackett because we'll talk about them when we get to 2A, since the defending 3A champions. But that's a good starting point right there. Brinkley Morton and the Lincoln Wolves. And then, of course, AC Cox, Harley Grammer, and those DeWitt Dragonettes.
Well, Brinkley is an amazing kid, amazing athlete. She just, you don't go play in the SEC if you're not crazy talented. And, she's headed to Mississippi State. I'm heartbroken that that's where she's going and not to the Hill in Fayetteville, but great kid, great talent. I've met her and talked to her and know her family over the last 3 or 4 years since we've been doing this. Didn't know them before that, but when we got into this, gotten to know them a little bit. Just really, really good people, and she's a great kid. And she's one of the best hitters in the state, one of the best pitchers in the state, kind of like Elena Lyle. She's top 5 or 10 in both categories. So can't say enough about her. And she's got a pretty good supporting cast, this year. And I think that they're going to be right back in that deal. You took my line on DeWitt because I absolutely like DeWitt to be in the top 3 or so in 3A without a doubt. AC Cox, Harley Grammer, Belle Easterwood, Chloe Lloyd, Emma Bizarro. There's just great player after great player after great player when you look at their roster. And I'm like, holy cow, this is like a who's who of like great travel ball players. I don't know how many total there are. Niecy Hill's a great pitcher. There's just a good player and a good player and a good player everywhere you look on their roster. And I'm like, I see these kids all the time in the summer, and they're all great individually. I'm like, man, you got all these kids on one team in 3A? Like, how's that happen? And, the other 2 teams that we haven't talked about yet that we will, but that, we started with Lincoln and DeWitt. But the next 2, in my opinion, that you got to talk about in 3A are Mayflower and Lamar. Mayflower.
Absolutely.
Kylie Branson, Tori Barksdale, Alyssa Higgins, Ruby Otts, Michelle Duvall, Natalie Hurley. Golly, same thing.
And a lot of those kids have been playing since like 2022, 2023. Yeah.
Kids that have been together for 3 or 4 years, and they're all great players. And then you move over at Lamar, and you've got Corey Sanders, that's an amazing basketball and softball player. She's a great shortstop. You got Harley Wicker, that's one of the quickest little speedy lefty slapper kids that I've ever seen, and just a workhorse. And you got Addie Harden behind the plate. It just, man, everywhere I look at Lamar's lineup, same thing.
Yeah.
It blows my mind how many of these teams in 3A have so much talent. You would think they were like a 6A school. 3A is just funneling talent in this state. I don't know how in the world.
And just wait till we talk about Hackett in 2A now.
I haven't even got down to 2A Hackett, but and then I'll tell you a team that we need to talk about a little bit. 2 other teams that we need to talk about in 3A. We need to talk about Falk has got a lot of talent this year. And then you got to talk about Boonville that's going to be in 3A that's got a lot of talent. Again, they lost Lexi Franklin, but, man, they got all kinds of talent other than that. And so, if they've got a young arm or someone that can step in and take over a little bit of what Lexi Franklin left off, Boonville's loaded with talent as far as defense and hitting. So I really think at Falk, you're going to see them take a big step this year. You got Kendall Haworth and Lainey Richardson, and you've got Kaylin Hamilton that moved over from Genoa Central to Falk. That's a UAM commit in the circle. So
that's huge to add that.
I really like Falk this year having a chance to push in that top 5 or 6 conversation. And we're still 6 teams away from talking about some of the best teams in 3A. Well,
and I was about to say, like everything you mentioned, I was going to add on to. I'm going to add Harding Academy to that mix. I think that Harding Academy is due. So they've got Ace Ellis coming back. Ace Ellis is committed to UT Martin Jr. It's looking like she's going to play outfield in college, but she pitches in that leadoff spot. Really has been kind of their no pun intended, their ace since Ava Ellis is her name, goes by Ace, but she's been their ace in the circle since her freshman year, and she's been big for them too. Mackenzie Bird, there's a few that I actually talked to. So their new coach, of course, Rusty Garner is now at Harding University as the assistant women's basketball coach. Will Francis, who was the offensive coordinator, now get this, Jared, I hadn't told you about this. Will Francis was the OC for Harding Academy's football team. He is now think he's an assistant for the Harding University football team now. I don't want to say, but it's on the offensive side, and he's also still coaching softball. So he's going back and forth from spring football to so he's gonna, and he's also got a toddler and another baby on the way. So Will is gonna have his plate full. So great dude, great coach, but he's gonna have a loaded squad this year. I had a chance to see this team in that Benton round robin last year. I got a chance to see him play Valley View. They actually won that game. Was really impressed. So and talking about a second ago in 5A, how there's going to be one of those central teams that likely gets left out just because that conference is so loaded. That's kind of how this region has worked when you pair the 3A5 and the 3A6. 3A6 is where Harding Academy is, and they beat Lamar in that regional. So Lamar was left out of the state tournament last year. So that's your really solid team that was they were a semifinalist team. Lamar was the year before. They were 60 feet away from beating Atkins, or at least tying it up, to possibly go to the state championship game. And I think that this Lamar team, with all that they have endured over the past 2 years in particular, and all the players that they have coming back, and also too, they're no longer in the bloodbath gauntlet that is the 3A5. They're in the 3A4 now with Mansfield, who has moved up from Class 2A. Also, Boonville's in that conference. So not to say that it's easier necessarily, but I do think that you've got some more favorable matchups in there week in and week out than you do playing Baptist Prep and Atkins and all those teams multiple times a year. So on top of, playing a tough non-conference schedule. So I think Lamar and Harding Academy are going to be two that jump in to possibly that top 4, top 5. I do think that could happen, especially Lamar. I feel really comfortable in saying that. But Mansfield moving up to 3A. Dealing with life after Allison Edwards. Allison Edwards is one of the greatest multi-sport athletes that has ever come through this state. When you think about volleyball, basketball, and softball, 8 state championships that she went to, won all kinds of overall female athlete of the year awards, now getting a lot of playing time at Omaha as both a pitcher and first base. So there's a lot of questions about some of these. Atkins is another one of those teams that they have 4 returning starters. They're going to have to deal with life with post Libby May. Libby May is now at Nicholls State. So you got a lot of teams in this conference or this classification who are going to be dealing with life after pitchers that they've had for 3 or 4 years. Some other sleepers I look at, 3A2 conference, Melbourne's always tough. Salem is. Mountain View, I don't know what they're going to do, but I really like their junior pitcher, Emma Day. She's a college prospect. Talked to their coach a little bit. And she is definitely a college prospect, been pitching for him since her freshman year. Ashnet, you mentioned Falk already. Genoa Central kind of sneaks out of nowhere. I know they lost, Kaylin is now at Falk, but they always tend to find a way to sneak in there, along with Ashdown. Ashdown, you think about in 2022, before they moved up to 4A, when they were still in 3A in the previous cycle, they had a great season. But they maybe had a few slip-ups, kind of down the road, and then they ended up going on and winning the state championship. So Ashdown and Genoa are two in that southwest corner that can sometimes pop up out of nowhere.
Yeah, Salem was one that I was going to mention. Salem had a really good year last year and did really well, and I feel like Salem has a chance to be somewhere in that conversation again this year. They returned quite a bit. So definitely one of the ones that I had on my list to mention, and you beat me to it again. I don't know what Ashdown's going to have this year. I haven't been able to get much information on them, but they're always good. And I do know that, like Jayla Coleman, I believe, went back from Arkansas High back to Ashdown. So,
and they do have their third coach in 3 years. Thomas Prince came from Emerson, is now there. So that's something to keep an eye on too. So
I do know that they're going to have 3 or 4 really talented players there. They seem like they're always in the conversation, so I would never write them off as far as them having a chance to be in that conversation. But this year, I just don't have a ton of information on them. It's been a little bit harder to get a little bit on them to find out what they have or they don't have individually. I'll tell you, going back to Lamar for just a minute, the big question I think that's going to be with Lamar is Lamar has the talent as hitters and defensively for sure. The question for Lamar, if they make it, or if they're going to be able to make that big push into state semifinals or finals, is whether or not they have enough pitching depth. I think is going to be the only question, and we'll see how that rides out over 2 to 3 weeks of the season. And if they have some arms that really come along, and come on, I think Lamar has as good a chance as anybody to make a lot of noise this year.
And down in 2A. So we'll just go ahead and cover the elephant in the room. I think that looking at everything and knowing what Hackett has coming back and they're moving down, the narrative is probably that Hackett's just going to run away with this thing. Now, I will go ahead and say this is the first time I've really mentioned rankings, but Hackett's going to be our number 1 2A team. I mean, we'll go ahead and just get that out of the way. They're going to be our number 1 2A team. I'm fine with them being the favorite because that's completely fair. I would probably say they're my favorite too, but Jared, we got to remember Riverside. I've watched this Riverside team very closely since these seniors they're going to lose just about everybody because this senior class has pretty much started since their freshman year. I think their freshman year, there was like 6 or 7 that started. And I first got a chance to see them in the regional tournament, really right around the time that Claire Womack had begun pitching because she had been hurt in basketball. So she was mainly just kind of playing outfield and other positions. But you think about the Kaylee Coxes, the Katie Ridges, Anna Lee Qualls. I mean, these girls have played together a lot, just like Hackett has. And so I think if there's anybody that is going to compete with Hackett, it's going to be Riverside on the other side of the state. What it's going to look like after that, we'll talk about that here in a second, but I'll get your thoughts. Hackett, yes, let's go ahead and say they're going to be the favorite coming in, but we can't forget about Riverside either.
Well, probably the most asked question I've had in the offseason is why is Hackett in 2A? So I've probably had 100 different parents and coaches ask me why Hackett is in 2A after winning the 3A state championship in softball. I can't speak to what the AAA thinks. If I could, I'd be a mind reader. But, Hackett, without a doubt, is one of the best teams in the state in 3A, and they won the 3A state championship, and now they're in 2A. And, well, it would be a no-brainer. You got to consider them as your favorite. But definitely, they return a huge part of what they had, and they add 2 or 3 really talented freshmen into that group. Hackett is going to be really, really good. Riverside, without a doubt, is loaded. Has been loaded. Most of those girls have been there. This is going into their 3rd and 4th year playing together at Riverside. Claire is an amazing pitcher.
She was hurt last year too, so as far as we know, she's pretty healthy this year.
She played nearly the entire season hurt last year, from what I heard. Great kid, great character kid. Mackenzie Freeman's an amazing pitcher at Hackett. Those two, I think, are going to carry storylines for their teams all year long, just being dominating pitchers and doing their thing. And without a doubt, we'll see them in state tournament, both those teams in state tournament, short of some kind of massive injuries or something going crazy. Those two teams are going to be there, and I expect those are my 2 that I feel like are going to be right at the top of the list. But golly, there is so much talent in 2A. It's just like we were talking about in 3A a minute ago. It's only a slightly scaled down version that you go to 2A. There's just a little drop off maybe from 3A talent to 2A talent because there's a ton of really good teams in 2A. That are going to be maybe not right there with Hackett and Riverside, but just barely a step off of that. And there's a whole group of probably 7 or 8 other teams right behind those two that you're like, man, those teams could sneak in there and play for a state championship. It's hard to say that anybody could knock off Riverside or Hackett to me, but there's a really good crop of teams right behind them that are that next little sub step down. And yeah, to me, you've got to start talking about Des Arc with Kaylee McDonald. They have a lot of talent there. Kaylee McDonald's one of the best pitchers in the state. She's probably a top 5 overall pitcher in the state of Arkansas. Just really impressive. Big, strong kid that can throw the ball hard, and she has pretty good movement. She, in her first couple of years, has stacked up strikeouts. She's putting up 200 and 300 strikeouts a year, which is insane. So definitely Des Arc's one that I want to talk a little bit about being in that conversation just outside the top 1 or 2, but they're right there knocking on the door. Some teams that I really think that are going to make a little bit of a push this year that we haven't talked about nearly as much in the past. Bigelow. Bigelow is a team that's kind of they've been good, but not really a state tournament team. Well, this year they added a couple of sisters that transferred in, and they got pretty much everybody back. And so now all of a sudden they've got two more really big sticks in their lineup, which is kind of what they were missing, was just one or two runs a game to win a lot of games. I think Bigelow's going to make a lot of noise in 2A that a lot of people, nobody would have expected them to start making a push for it as a possible deep state tournament team. And there's a whole pile of other 2A teams that we can get into, but we only have so much time, so I won't get into all of them. But Quitman's going to be really good.
Yes. Yeah. Quitman, that's what I had them on my list. They lost Chloe Lyles, an all-state pitcher, but if there's anything I've learned about Stephanie Davis, I don't really make my judgment on them until the post, because it doesn't really matter what they do during the regular season. You think about I think it was 2022, they lost to EPC 2-1 in the semifinal round. Did not see that coming. And there's been a couple other times they've surprised. So I think Quitman's always in that mix every single year. No question.
For sure. I'll tell you a team that hasn't been on a lot of radars in the past, but they better get on somebody's radar for 2A this year is Poen. Poen made a big step and improved a lot last year. They had freshman last year, and she's sophomore this year, Jaden Work. That's a really good pitcher. A lot of spin, and this year she's really been working out and gotten a lot stronger and built up some speed. Avery Oden's a great catcher there. That same thing. She's a sophomore. They're very young and super talented. They've got some new ones coming in as freshmen this year that are really talented. Ella Moore and Emma Sexton. Emma Sexton is a kid that we're going to hear a lot about over the next 3 or 4 years too. So she's a really good pitcher, got a lot of power, and you add that second big arm with Jaden Warwick, and all of a sudden Owen goes from being just a good team in their conference to being a really good team in the state. Akron is another little 2A school that has not always been in the conversation when it comes to, being in the state pitcher. But you got Caitlin Ledbetter there that's a really strong pitcher. And then her little sister, Addie, comes up as a freshman this year that's a really good catcher shortstop that adds to them. And they won quite a few games last year. We talked about them once or twice kind of late in the year. They were kind of starting to come on the scene and looking better. And they've got a couple of good freshmen coming in that's going to give them a push. Of course, we always have to talk about Woodlawn. Lily Faye McWhirter is, Arkansas commit and just an amazing pitcher. Possibly the best pitcher in the state of Arkansas. Has crazy power, throws upper 60s or lower 70s. She had an injury and had to have a hip surgery, but she's back, I think, fully released now, or about to be fully released, and ready to roll. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. There's just everywhere you look in 2A, it's just like 3A. There's talent, and then you've always got Carlisle too. Carlisle's got a lot of talent. They had 2 young pitchers last year, and they still made a pretty good push late in the season. And Golden's always got a good program there, and they have a great system with great support within their community. A lot of talent there. They've had a couple move-ins. So I expect Carlisle to be right in that conversation in the top 8 or 10 teams in 2A. Just the same thing that we talked about in 3A that you got to look at in 2A, that they're just everywhere you look, there's a great team just off the fringes of being that state semifinal or state championship team.
Yeah, I was going to add on to, something about Desark I wanted to mention. Grace Knight was, she had caught for them for a while, and last year she was injured. I think she's going to Three Rivers College, if I'm not mistaken. She had a hand injury, comes back, and they put her at short or third, somewhere in the infield. And then in her place, Kimber Buckner ended up catching, did a great job. Kimber also batted 320, 330, was really good at the plate as well. So that was kind of the turning point. Talking to their coaches, that was kind of the turning point that they really like, okay, we've got something that we really like here, a lineup that we feel like can make us really successful. So I think if all those girls stay healthy, like you said, I mean, Kaylee McDonald does what Kaylee McDonald does, and she was an All-American on some list. I mean, she was phenomenal. Like you said, just hundreds and hundreds of strikeouts per year. Also talked about Quitman. CAC, let's talk about the Mustangs for a second. That was one of the better runs. I mean, they were really, of all the teams in postseason play, that was probably one of the ones that really shocked us. You know, they got healthy at the right time. We know what Kayla Myers can do, whether she's in the circle, whether she's at the plate, playing in the outfield. You know, Jared, being a CAC alumnus, I can tell you we've had some really good female athletes come through. We've got one that went to the WNBA. We've got some that have played high-level college basketball. Kayla Myers is up there with the best I've seen. And like I said, I've seen a lot of with my own two eyes throughout 25 years. She is phenomenal, whether it be volleyball. I mean, she is just especially in softball. Of course, she helped lead the Lady Mustangs to the state final and the 3A final in volleyball, and then the run that they went on last year. So, I mean, she is just one of those game changer type players. So if CAC stays healthy, I think, they did lose Ella Blakely behind the dish. That's big, but I think they could still be due for a really big season. Carlisle, or go ahead.
For sure, they were one of the ones on my list that I hadn't even talked about yet, CAC, and exactly what you said. Kayla Myers is unreal. She's a great pitcher. She's a great hitter. She's a great outfielder. She's just an amazing athlete. She's maybe an even better volleyball player than she is a softball player. It's hard to say because she's so good at both. She has the chance to play major college, in my opinion, major college softball and volleyball. You know, if she wanted to, or if a school is interested in her doing both, she has the talent to play at a really high level in both sports. And you were talking about them going on their run. Unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it, we were a victim of that run. Yeah. That their first real big win was over us when we were really rolling last year. And we were rolling and winning a lot of games, and Jaylee was pitching great, and she even pitched really well against them, but they caught fire and beat us at home, and then they came back after we had them down 7-1 or had them down 6-1 in the 7th inning in district tournament, and we made a couple of errors late, and they came back and beat us 7-6, and we should have been able to squeak it out and push them out of there and got us into state tournament last year, and they knocked us out, and then they went on a run like no other and won like 5 straight there. But a huge part of that was Kayla Myers. But they've got a lot of really good players too. You know, they've got the Alyssa Jansen, Addie Browning, Kendall Walker, Delaney Huffman. They've got 2 new girls that I don't know yet, but I've got their names. Caroline Hill and Hannah Hughes that apparently they seem to be really high on this year. So that's another team in 2A that's going to be right there in that conversation, in that mix. And we haven't even talked about the conference that Cutter Morning Star's in. I'm trying to work on getting some info because I don't have much info on our conference, and I typically don't ask for a lot from conference coaches because I know they don't want to give information that will hurt them during the season. I try to let you handle that, so we'll let you get a little more information on them and talk about it. But you got Murfreesboro and Horatio, Foreman, and then Cutter Morning Star, and possibly even Spring Hill in our conference that are all going to be historically have some decent softball teams, or at least Cutter has the last few years, and then those others have historically had some good softball teams. I feel like, and I don't know anything in detail, I feel like Murfreesboro, Horatio are definitely going to be in that conversation in our conference. And there's always good talent there. 2 years ago, Izzy Brinkley was really making noise at Murfreesboro, and the ranking girl was doing really well at Horatio, I believe. So I'm going to try to get a little more information on our conference. Definitely, I feel like Jaylee's going to have a good year for us this year in the circle and have a chance to really put the cap on a really good career. She's very close to 600 career strikeouts now and has a chance to maybe even go well over 700 for her career. we graduated a lot last year, Cutter. So I don't know if we'll be in the mix for anything. We're waiting to see if we're going to maybe be able to get some of our basketball girls to help us out. And they're going really deep in 2A basketball. So we're hoping by about the second or third week of the season to get a little help.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, you never know. I mean, a lot of these teams that we're talking about, they could. Sorry, I've been sick, guys. I apologize for the all that stuff that's been going around. A guy like a major frog in my throat. But yeah, no, I mean, it's just all about the way the ball bounces. There's going to be teams that we're not mentioning on here. The Gentry, for instance, I think last year we might have mentioned Gentry is going to be well improved, but we didn't expect them to be what they ended up being. And there's other ones that we could point to. So it's just really about how the ball bounces. But I wanted to talk about, you mentioned Carlisle was one to watch. Last year that was kind of one of the things that we continue to say. We didn't really know we knew they had talent. We just didn't really know how good they were because it just wasn't the strongest strength of schedule. That's not the case this year. Credit to Coach Golden. They set up, I think it's 4 college campus games. They're going to play Taylor. They're going to play Hack. I mean, these are going to be really, really fun. I mean, they're at, you got a game at OBU. You got one. I don't want to say anything wrong, but they're going to have some at college campuses. And that's really big, not only for the programs that are playing, that's big for the state. I'd love for us to see doing stuff like that more, but losing Lake and Golden and losing Libby McIntyre, that's obviously 2 really big hits right there. But you've still got Jessa Wiles. She's really great middle infielder there. She's obviously really fast. Of course, McKinley Cook, that's a kid that you really root for. I know you've coached her in travel ball, and she's just continues. She started since her freshman, played a lot since her freshman year, and just continuously gotten better every single season. And as you said, they relied on some really young arms last year that did a really good job for them. So I think that, we're going to find out a lot sooner than later what Carlisle is. And again, I think just like we said last year, we weren't denying that they were a talented team or anything like that. But we're going to probably find out a lot sooner this year, kind of what the Lady Bison have. And then also too, I think EPC is going to make the biggest improvement of any 2A school. Brandon Powell, he built that program from the ground up. He's taken them to their only state final appearance in 2022. His last 2 pitchers, Keegan McCorkle and then Megan, oh my gosh, her name's slipping my mind, but those 2 kind of, they took their lumps their freshman year, throwing just about every single inning, just like Kylie Henderson did last year as a freshman. And he said both of those 2, Megan and Keegan, both really took a major jump from their freshman to their sophomore year. He feels like Kylie can do that. Also, you get Kellyanne Lucas back, who is technically a 4-year starter, but she was out, I think, just about all of last year with a torn ACL. You got her back at second base. You got Mercedes Real, that's a 4-year starter at center field. So you got a good bit coming back. I know they got a transfer from Rivercrest that they feel really good about. So I do feel like EPC, even though they didn't have a bad year last year by any means, maybe a little bit less from their standards, but I think the Lady Warriors are really going to make some improvement from last year to this season.
Yeah, for sure. I like EPC's chances to make a big jump this year. They were on my list as well. So definitely a team that we'll probably be talking about scattered throughout the year.
And last but not least, in 1A, another $1 million question is baseball side too. We question, is anybody going to knock Taylor off the mountain? The baseball team is a 3-time defending state champion. Softball is a state record for all classifications, 7-time defending state champion. And Jared, they graduated just about, that 2024 class was massive. Just about all those girls played since their freshman year. So yes, they're going to have some new faces that have played innings, but look, this is a softball and baseball town. Coach McHenry is very confident in what she has coming back, but I'll tell you what they do have that nobody else has. They have a returning 3-time state tournament MVP in Ayla Buford, of course, going to Southern Arkansas, SAU. Has just been incredible throughout her whole entire career. What she did for them as a freshman and the schedule that they play 5 and 6A schools every year. She's just a bulldog there in the circle. Of course, her little sister Adley. If one Buford's not enough, then you got her little sister Adley coming up as a freshman. That's also a phenomenal athlete in her own right. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of new faces for Taylor, but I've talked to a lot of 1A coaches, and pretty much all of them, that's kind of, they'll ask me, who do I think is in the mix besides Taylor? Obviously, that's the one that you always point to. And, I'll mention the teams, and that's one thing that they'll always go back to. You can't trade tradition. They know what it's like to play on the big stage. The first championship in 2017 of this run, these seniors were like 12 years old or whatever it was. So they have seen all that, and then they've experienced it themselves. You just can't trade tradition. Now, that being said, last year and the year before, Bradley kind of moved up. First year we did this, it was just a Taylor free, and we kind of had a feeling that it was going to be Taylor and nobody else. Bradley moved into that mix, and now I think this year, of course, you've got Scranton that got hot. Scranton was Whitney Bateman and her staff. I mean, they have just done. Scranton didn't even have a program in 2022. They got it back in 2023, and then a year later, they're in the state final. That was just a really interesting story because Scranton was 2-10 through March, and they played Hackett, Bentonville West, Van Buren, Atkins. I mean, they loaded their schedule. Then they won 14 straight to make it to the state final. And then, of course, they lost to Taylor, but they've got everybody back as well. So Taylor, Scranton, and then Westside. We've seen Westside girls win a golf state championship. I feel pretty confident in saying they're probably going to win a basketball 1A state championship. And from top to bottom, they've probably got the most talented roster when you think about just, again, from all that they've added. Ashlyn Cossey and Caitley Cornett, not Lakin, I think that's her cousin, Caitley Cornett from Concord, Whitley Goodson also. And then you add Addie Overturf from Shirley. That's a great multi-sport athlete. She can pitch. She can play shortstop. She can play center field. Jeff Smith is really, really excited about this group, and rightfully so, because he already had some talent. Eden Murphy was one of those, Lainey Gentry, Lacey Baker. But then you bring in and you have all those girls. And on top of that, it's a small area. They've grown up around each other. They've grown up playing sports together. This is going to be a special Westside team, I think, just like the rest of the girls' sports have been thus far.
Well, definitely, to me, the team that's going to make the biggest jump is Westside. Of course, some of that is talent they already had there. They had a giant crop of move-ins. There's so many transfers in for Westside this year. But Eden Murphy is going to be a person that we're going to talk about in the circle. Lacey Baker is going to pitch some. They swap off playing first base, I think, when they're not pitching. Yep. And Addie Overturf, and but definitely with Westside, the story is going to be all that new talent. They top to bottom may be the most talented team. For sure, if they have the arms, if they have 2 to 3 arms that they count on, they're going to be really tough to beat with all that talent stacked up in one place. The two that you mentioned, of course, we're always going to talk about Taylor. Without a doubt, Taylor is a machine, and they produce state championship after state championship. You have 3-time state MVP, Ayla Buford. Her little sister's coming to help her this year. You've got Aniston Nolte, that's a really good little shortstop, and she's another good pitcher. She's a very solid little pitcher that's going to help them in the circle and take a little bit of the heat off Ayla Buford. They breed great hitting in Taylor. Regardless of how great Ayla's been in the circle or anything else, Taylor always hits the ball well. And that's not going to change this year. They're going to have a lot of good hitters. They've got Macy Downs at first base, and they've got Callie McHenry in the outfield. I guarantee you there's going to be 6 kids that bat 450 or better in this lineup with Taylor. And the team that I really feel like might get everybody's attention, they did a little bit at the end of the year making that run, but Scranton, I'm telling you, Scranton has got talent this year. They were really good last year, and they just added to it. They didn't lose anybody, and they added talent. They've got some really talented freshmen coming in. So when you look at Scranton, you've got Delaney Maynard that's just had an amazing year last year pitching. She didn't have her greatest game in the state championship itself, but all year long she put up crazy numbers, and she's just gotten better. I have her in travel, and I had her in the fall, and she put up some of the best numbers in the entire state in travel last year. Just got better and better and better all fall against some of the best competition in travel there is. And then you've got her little sister Brecken that's going to be a really, really solid little freshman player that can help them in the infield, help them with the bat, and in the circle, give Delaney a little break on the pitching. And they've got another girl that's going to be able to pitch with them, Marissa Harrington. I think it's actually Marissa Harrington Lays, if I'm getting the name correct. Emily Kramers and Morgan Lindsay and Katie Vonderheide. And I mean, there's just everywhere you look in their lineup is great bat or great defensive player, or I mean, they're just really, really talented. And like you said, they didn't have a program. 3 years ago, they didn't even have a program. Then they got the program back. Then they went to the state championship, and now they've got talent out their ears and a lot of young talent too. So Scranton, Westside, and Taylor are definitely going to be the three that we talk about all year long in 1A. And then there's going to be about 3 or 4 others that we've got to talk about as a possibility of getting in that mix. But those 3 are going to fight each other all year for who's going to be looking at that top 1 to 2 spots in 1A.
And Bradley has been the only, I think, in the time that we've done this, Bradley has been the only other 1A team that has at some point in the season held the number 1 spot when they had beaten Taylor in, 2023, I think it was. So I still like, Bradley lost. They lost Ainsley Moore. She's now at Tech. And so that is a massive blow. But the good news is most everybody else is back. So it is going to be a little bit of a pitcher by committee right now, just trying to figure that out. But I certainly still think Bradley is going to be in the mix for those top 5 spots, no question about it. Another one that snuck out of nowhere last year out of South Arkansas, Hampton. I think that's another one that I haven't gotten a ton of information on, but Scranton, I think, beat them in the quarterfinals like 7-6, and they played really well throughout the whole season, did the Lady Bulldogs, and as far as I know, they were pretty young, so that's one to look out for possibly in that like South Central region. But I mean, really, other than those 3, Jared, I'm really honestly only comfortable with maybe mentioning about 5 teams right now, just because 1A is just, it's been a Taylor, it to an extent has been a Taylor Invitational, along with pretty much the storylines that we have had, other than Taylor and maybe talking about Bradley, is the 1A2 conference. Shirley, I think that they lost a good Hunter Hutto. She graduated. And then, of course, Addie, that, their top 2 players are no longer there. You look at Viola, they graduated a good bit, including Haley Krotz, who was a phenomenal pitcher for them for her whole career. So the 1A2 is definitely going to look a lot different, and you also had Westside in that conference too. So it was always just extremely Calico Rock is another one. Concord, I still think they've got a few pieces left, but they did, we mentioned that a good bit of their core went to Westside, but the other teams in that 1A2 were Calico Rock and Concord. So how will they fare? But, other than that, I look at Bradley, I look at Hampton, and it's just kind of a wait and see with 1A to me.
Yeah, Bradley, Hampton, I think maybe Midland.
Midlands, yeah, they need to be mentioned too. Yes.
Were the 3 others that I had written down that we'd be talking about some this year in 1A. So definitely you touched on those. But I think we're going to spend a lot of time talking about 3 teams in 1A. And, rightfully so. They're just loaded with talent.
Yeah, no question about it. So, well, we just completed all 6 classes. Before we do get out of here, though, I want to make sure and give some shout outs. So, we are not able to do this without some financial support as well. Jared and I would say this podcast is probably our game day. We put in the work as far as watching and following games all week and then compiling notes and then talking about them on the show. And then we finally do get to talk about it. This is by far the most fun part. Well, we're able to do that because we've had people step up that are going to give us some financial support, and we want to talk about those real quick. So we're starting something new this year. The player of the week. This is going to be a statewide player of the week. To my knowledge, I know there's regional players of the week. I don't believe that there is a statewide player of the week for baseball and softball. So that even if there is, there'll be one through us as well. So Team Funded, who whenever we made the switch over last year to Natural State Sports about early April, they stepped up and they picked up the Super 7 rankings for the rest of the season, which we will get to that here in a second. But talked to them this year, and I ran by them. Hey, what would you think of sponsoring a player of the week? And they were all in on that. So each week we are going to get together, Kevin Bohannon, of course, on the baseball side, and then Jared and I on the softball side. We're going to put our heads together and we're going to decide a player of the week. And the winner, if it's a local kid, then I will, or somebody will deliver it to you. If it's, far away, then we will mail you a shirt. We're going to have red shirts with that logo on it. So if you're working out or whatever, it'll just kind of be an extra shirt for you to wear. They're pretty nice. So we appreciate Chasen Bowman, Kyle Slayton, as well as Jay Keith for helping us. Those are the Arkansas reps. I really appreciate those guys for stepping up to the plate. No pun intended. Team funded. If you haven't looked at a fundraising company, they are just great to work with, real just laid back guys, and also former coaches. So they can certainly relate to you. And we'll talk more about them as the season goes along. Athletic Field Service of Arkansas. You see their logo up in the top left corner there. They stepped up last year for us. Jeremy Rice and his crew, they just do a great job. If you go look at their Facebook pages and their Twitter page, they just do so much great work with any natural surface, football field, softball, baseball. They can handle it for you. Jared, I know they did some work for you guys at Cutter. Always just do a phenomenal job, and great people as well. So also Extra Inning Softball. Now, this is more of a partnership. They are not sponsoring us. I actually reached out to them and had a great conversation. I actually talked with Bonnie Holland, their CEO and owner, on a episode. I've actually been, if you haven't been following, I've been doing some episodes. I've talked to a couple of Razorback commits. I've talked to Bonnie Holland, the CEO and owner, and she has really, since she has taken over sole ownership of that company, she's really put an emphasis on revamping the rankings, getting more content for teams out there. And she's not just wanting to get content for the big D1 kids. She's wanting to get into D2, D3, JUCO. They're really making an effort to get more kids noticed, and we're going to try to do that here in Arkansas. So we're really excited about working with Extra Inning Softball. Also, Chinook Seedery. This is one that I am extra excited about because everybody knows if I try not to do the Zen and the Velos and that tobacco and stuff. So I try to at games do the sunflower seeds, and I can easily go through a bag. But you go to ChinookSeedery.com, type in NSS Media for 10% off of your order. I've tried all these except for the cinnamon toast. I'm not a big cinnamon fan, but jalapeno ranch and hatch chili are my favorites. Also, Smokehouse Barbecue is an extremely underrated one. So this is the seed of USA Baseball, D1 Baseball, D1 Softball. So they are the preferred pretty much for all baseball and softball, or most baseball and softball players. And then last but not least, Jared, I've talked to you maybe a little bit about this, but we mentioned it on the baseball episode. So for this year's Super 7, we are going to be sponsored by Fearless Friday. I talked to Lanny Beavers, the owner of that company. Of course, Fearless has been around for years. Many of you know them through football and a little bit of basketball. I've just had so much respect for what they do for so long that I reached out to Lanny. I said, hey, what would you think about doing some spring sports coverage? And I told him about how, these are a pretty big hit. People love to look at these. And so I think this would be a really good start for us to partner up and get some stuff promoting the kids. And so Fearless Friday that is going to step up for that. And these will be the Fearless Friday Super 7 baseball and softball rankings. So we'll be talking a little bit more as the year goes on about our sponsors, and of course we'll be promoting them all year long. And if you want to, we have some more spots available, and the more help we get, we're obviously not trying to build mansions with this. We're just trying to compensate for time. Because Jared he's got multiple jobs. I've pretty much got multiple jobs on top of this, just little different things I do. And so we want to do this. We truly enjoy it, but at the same time too, we do need some help with it, and it's going to go to a good cause. You see that, we've gone for over an hour and a half right now of content that you're not going to get anywhere else. And we'd love to do more stuff. So we'd love to talk with you. You can reach out to me. You can see my Twitter handle down there, or Kyle at naturalstatesports.com. Would love to talk to you. I can just about promise you we can find a package for you that would suit your needs and ours. So, Jared, I did want to say one more thing before we sign off here, and I'll let you build off of this as well if you want to. I've said this for the last few preview episodes, but for those especially that haven't really ever listened to us before, maybe not know us, we're going to say some things on here, and I'm sure there's one or two or maybe even more that we've been wrong, especially since it's the first episode of the year that we were wrong on here. We're going to say some things that are wrong, where we cover a lot of different teams, a lot of different players. I do want to get that out of the way, so please forgive us for that kind of stuff. But also, too, don't take anything personal. If you don't see your name in the rankings, if you don't hear your name mentioned, it's obviously nothing, against you or whatsoever. Sometimes we might just forget. It might slip our minds. There were some things that Jared brought up that I forgot to write down in this episode, and maybe he could say the same. I don't know, but we just want to make sure that everybody understands we're in this for the right reasons. I'm going to say this here, and I'm going to put it to bed. We're in this for the right reasons because we have a passion for this game. We love promoting these kids. We genuinely care about these kids and these coaches. And so we just want to remind everybody that, pressure is a privilege. If you're talked about a lot or if you're highly ranked, if you're not and you think you should be, then you have a chance to prove that all season to us. And so we obviously don't want your play to reflect off of anything that comes from us or anything like that. But I just want to make sure, especially for the people that are new to this, we promise that we have your child, their team, their best interest at heart. And we're in this strictly for them. Also, too, we enjoy doing it. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that as we start a new season here.
Absolutely. The whole reason we ever got into this is just to promote kids. And, there's a lot of great young ladies all across the state playing this sport. And all we want to do is promote them and get as many kids mentioned as we can. Of course, obviously, there's literally thousands of young ladies playing softball in Arkansas, so we can't mention everybody. We're just trying to get as many as we can and do the best that we can for them. I've had one thing I'll bring up real quick before we go off. I've had a ton of parents and a ton of coaches ask us to do top player list again that we used to do. We would love to do that, but that's definitely one of those that if there's a company or somebody out there that would like to step up and sponsor player list for us and help us out with the time to do it, we would love to do it. Just need a little help on some sponsorship to spend the time to do it. And we'll be reaching out and talking to coaches and working on player lists if we can make that happen. So if you're one of those 50 or 60 or 70 people that have asked me about player lists over the last year, then, hey, help us find somebody that'll step up and sponsor us for it, and we'll get it done.
Yeah, that's right. We want to do, my goal, because that's the thing is, Jared and I are both busy, but look, I work from home. I'm here all the time. I work into the night sometimes. And so and that's what I do pretty much all day is I study stats. I talk to coaches, I study schedules. And so we would love to do as much as we can to get the kids' names out there. That's why we're doing this. So, well, this will be our only episode until at least after basketball season. So we'll pick back up, and this is how we've done it, the past few years to kind of give back. A big reason, yes, we want to give basketball its respect, but also we've touched on it throughout the show. There's a lot of kids that are contributing in basketball that are going to be contributing in softball. So it's going to be a little bit before we really have an inkling of what a lot of these teams are about. So that's when we'll be back. Now we'll be doing the play. I think I forgot to mention during the Player of the Week. That will be from the first week. So first week of March through the last week of April, the entire regular season. So we will have that coverage throughout, even basketball season as well. And then we'll pick back up with the podcast afterwards. So that'll be the March 17th, March 18th. So about a month from now. So other than that, you have anything, again, Kyle at naturalstatesports.com. You can reach out to me. Like I said, there's no such thing. I tell people all the time in journalism, there's no such thing as too much information. Now, whether we'll use that information or not, I can't always promise that, but I can tell you that there's no such thing as too much information. So please definitely let us know, of anything that we need to. So, but other than that, that'll do it for episode 57. Thank you for all tuning in. We look forward to the spring sports season for Jared Hawthorn and all of us here at Natural State Sports. My name's Kyle Sutherland. We will catch you in about mid-March.